Thank you, Aubrey, and I'm mic'd up so I can actually rove, right? Good. So I'm following two talks that I considered difficult to follow. One was really a set of deep thinking into some issues that are really, really important to me, so I really appreciate that talk, the first talk during the session. And then Lawrence, of course, brought us back to a place of thinking about new ideas and ways to get this movement and this set of research moved as quickly as possible. And he also brought the energy to the room. So what I'd like to do is start out by saying, I welcome you, anybody who wishes to and is able to stand up and stretch for a moment before I start, because for me, these sessions get really long. It's kind of like the 7th inning stretch, but we're not gonna sing Take Me Out to the Ball Game, for those of you that are American and know what I'm talking about. Just enjoy a good stretch, and I'll tell you what I'm planning to talk about today. So I was thinking about this as the conference proceeded. What wasn't being said? There's so many amazing scientific talks. This is really a set of the best in the world, best in class scientists thinking about these issues, and they've been doing longevity research before we were calling it longevity research, or before there was a health span movement, shall we say. But what I think this field needs more of, and maybe even this conference needed more of before the two talks that preceded me, and maybe still with patient advocacy, we need more patient advocacy. And this is something that I observed as the stem cell and regenerative medicine field developed. As Aubrey said, he and I know some people in common that we've both known for 20 years or more. And just briefly about myself, I worked on a couple of ballot initiatives in California, one in 2004 that created the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine and got an initial $3 billion to fund stem cell and related research. And at that time, we needed to do that because the research was threatened with effectively being shut down from funding at the federal level. I won't go into the details. It wasn't really shut down, but what was available was very limited. So we got it funded in California, which has, depending on the economists you talk to all the time, it's the 4th or the 5th biggest economy in the world now. Back then, it was the 5th or the 6th. Plus, we have a bunch of world-class institutions there, more than any other state, certainly, even though there are some other states that come close. And so for that reason, maybe we had a responsibility to do this so that the still very new field of stem cell research didn't get shut down. And the way that we were able to do that was by mobilizing a coalition of patient advocates. And I watched at scientific conferences at that time where there were just no patient advocates, there were no patients. And the thing about that is that patients are a really good mouthpiece. They're a trusted source of information for people that have maybe a similar disease as that patient in their family or as the patient advocate has in their family. They're very effective at moving policymakers to get things done. And so to the extent that we believe as a field that we need to do that, we need more patient advocacy. We absolutely need more public policy, and that's a global need. And we need actual movement in that area. And that is not a criticism at all, because I think some of the things that have been done, and I'll go into them maybe a little bit later, are excellent. But we have to be thinking about this as a global need. This is already a global field, and by the way, when I was talking about regenerative medicine and stem cells, I could tell people, well, you know, absolutely you and everybody you know has been touched by chronic illness or disease. But that didn't mean that they had one. Maybe someone in their family, a friend, they just certainly knew about somebody. Well, we're all aging. So this really is a field, I'm finally in a field that is applicable to literally everybody. And even someone as youthful and vibrant as Lawrence, first of all, he suffered with chronic disease for a while. I didn't know that. Interesting to hear. But also, even if he hadn't, and even as young as he is, or Sophia, the volunteer in the audience, the young medical student, they're aging, just like I am. My knees probably hurt a little more than theirs do right now, but we're all aging. Absolutely essential also, we need more public information programs, more science communications. And I know that Aubrey and others in his sphere, but particularly Aubrey, have been working on this for years. It is so important. I present a lot to early career scientists about patient advocacy, public communications, science communications, and public policy, and how they all intersect. And I really can't stress that enough. Now, I know that this is a group that's very aware of these things. You're here at this conference, your early days in a field that is suddenly going to have even more eyes on it very soon than it does now, especially as more discoveries are made and maybe make it through the pipeline. And so more communications, and those of you that are scientists or are knowledgeable about science, please take the initiative to, if you wish, just like if you wanted to stand, can't force anybody, and some people just want to be in their lab, but if you can participate in communicating with the public about science and about your work or work that you know about, that is so helpful, especially in this day and age where, at least in the US, science education is absolutely abysmal. And the other point I have up there, distributive planning, what I meant by that is we need distributive justice or healthcare justice to be something we think about in this field from the earliest days. Brian Kennedy said it earlier, we need to democratize the health span. And one of the issues I see with that, it's absolutely one of the pillars of my organization, the Health Span Action Coalition, which is a sister organization to the LEV Foundation. We have as a pillar that we want distributive justice to be a reality when it comes to the treatments and other IP that comes out of the work in this field. And the only way to really do that is to think about it early and put some things in place to make sure that it happens. It's much easier to do it that way than to do it later on. So I'm not a slide reader, but I'll just put up a quote from my co-founder, Bernie Siegel, at the Health Span Action Coalition. He and I worked together over the course of about 20 years, like Aubrey said, and he is, he's so many things. He's a lawyer, he's a cancer survivor, he founded the Regenerative Medicine Foundation, he founded the World Stem Cell Summit, a conference that the agency I helped found in California and many other organizations and people that I know participated in for 20 years, including Aubrey, a frequent speaker. And this is what we set out to do when, after working on the second ballot initiative to renew the funding for CIRM, we got another $5.5 billion in 2020. I ran that campaign. Bernie approached me and said, hey, I've been thinking about longevity and health span in recent years and I'm wondering if you'd be interested in building a global coalition around that, because Melissa, you're one of the few people I know that understands building a coalition is how you can really get some of the things done that a field needs. I always wanted to work with Bernie. So I took that opportunity and I'm thrilled that I did. Again, I'm not a slide reader, you can read about this on our website, but this is our list of priorities that we've had for a couple of years. Always happy to take feedback and input on that. These will evolve over time, absolutely. Just to give you an idea, some of you in the audience are part of the coalition already. We have now 170 organizations that are members, and that is spread across certainly scientific organizations, absolutely patient advocacy organizations, but also now we've expanded and we have space-focused organizations which is industry, but a different industry. And the reason for that, as you may know, is there's a lot of medical research now happening in space and people wanting to do research in space. So we have some space companies. We have a newsletter. I welcome you to go to our website and subscribe. It is put together by Eve Harold, a colleague of mine who is an author. Her most recent book, Robots and the People Who Love Them, is on a book tour right now, and I encourage you to take a look at that. She also wrote a book called The Stem Cell Wars, if anybody is interested in what we went through in the early 2000s with stem cell research. Okay, so patient advocacy. It's amazing to me how much we think alike. I loved Lawrence's talk, especially when he talked about Dallas Buyers Club, and I had in my plans to talk about HIV patient advocates who were forced in the late 80s and early 90s, as most of you I'm sure know, to absolutely not just be advocates and do what I do and some other organizations that you may have heard of in patient advocacy like Michael J. Fox, Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. You go to Washington and you meet with your local elected officials. Mine's always Nancy Pelosi, so it's hard to get that meeting, but you meet with your senators, and maybe you meet with other electeds that are focused somehow on what you are trying to advocate for. Great. But sometimes you can't do that. You're not being listened to, there isn't enough known, or the situation is so urgent that you have to cross over from being an advocate into being activists, and that's what the HIV community had to do. Lawrence showed us a photo of the Dallas Buyers Club. That is about the same time period that I was thinking about, which is a time period when ACT UP had to go, they went to Washington and they literally dumped the ashes of their former partners, lovers, on the lawn of the White House to make their point that there needed to be more money into that research. Yes, I already told you about Prop 71 and Prop 14. You might have already known about those, but between those two, and that is public policy, it's the ballot initiative process, not legislation, not the president writing executive order, but it's something that you can do. We can only do it in 26 states in the US, I wish it were more, and you can get an initiative passed by the voters of California to put laws in place and or to fund something, which is what we've done to the tune of $8.5 billion at this point. Breast cancer, this is a perfect example of why advocacy is so important. As I've heard over the years, before Susan G. Komen sadly passed away and her sister Nancy Brinker, this was in the early 80s, felt the need to advocate on behalf of breast cancer patients because there wasn't enough information and there wasn't enough research happening. And a lot of the research was going at that point toward prostate cancer research, and you look around and you say, why? Well, because Congress was full of men and science was full of men and research was being done on men. And so that was one of the things that they sought to address. I think that as a general statement has changed a lot now, but what they needed to do was elevate the conversation about breast cancer. And is there anyone in the room that doesn't know what the pink ribbon stands for? Anyone? Exactly. I'm not looking for hands, I'm looking for the absence of hands. Everybody knows they did a great job. Their organization, it's had ruminations over the years. I'm not advocating for them, but the fact that they had to do that to elevate the conversation. So this is a group of patient advocates that I worked with when we were working to get Prop 14 passed in 2020 to get that additional $5.5 billion. I just always like to show them. It's very moving to me to see them. It's also very compelling. The person right in the middle, for example, behind the gentleman in the wheelchair, who, by the way, let's start with him, was the fourth patient in the Geron trial, if you've ever heard of that, the first stem cell-based trial in the US, and it was funded by CIRM, the agency that I helped build. Rich Lahara, he's now on the board of CIRM, which I think is an excellent outcome, that he's one of the advocates on the board. The woman behind him lost her husband and then her 3 adult children to Huntington's disease and currently is worried about her grandchildren. Now they understand the disease. She advocates in Washington every year. She's trying to get for Huntington's patients what ALS patients already have because the ALS community has done an amazing job as advocates. And I tell you all this because I know that this field goes back and forth about whether or not we should talk about aging and longevity, via several diseases, focusing on individual diseases, or if we should focus just on aging. And I think it's really both. And so many of the diseases that are associated with aging are diseases that there are great advocacy groups for, and they need to be our partners in this. Something that really struck me after Dr. Serrano's talk on Friday, I was inspired, and I went to the website of Altos Labs, and I learned that their founder, Hal Barron, was actually inspired by Shinya Yamanaka and the derivation of iPS cells, which happened on my watch, if you will. We had opened the doors of CIRM, we funded Shinya to come to California for 6 months out of every year, which he was doing in those earliest years of the 2000s. And in 2006, he succeeded first, using what we now know as the Yamanaka factors, to derive induced pluripotent stem cells, which really have been a game changer. And that's what inspired this amazingly accomplished individual to then start Altos Labs, which I loved reading about. He himself is a patient advocate, if you read that quote. So public policy, what does it even mean to work on public policy? It could mean so many things. It really is a regular and ongoing effort. So I was recently in Washington, June 5th, for the 11th annual Society for Brain Mapping Day in Washington. And they literally have inspired or been part of the conversation around many of the things, all of the things that I've listed there. And I'm not a slide reader, but they have made a difference just by doing this one day in Washington a year, but also consistently being in touch with elected officials, appointed officials. They're trying to get some things done in California now. A4LI. You may all know about this organization. You may know Dylan. He's done amazing work. We now have a congressional caucus. They did a fly-in, their first annual this year, and my colleague Bernie was there. Excellent, and I'm so glad that they have done that. Now what are we going to do? And they're going to need help because guess what? That's one caucus. And to someone who has never been involved in trying to move policy in Washington, you may not understand. I had ChatGPT tell me how many there are right now. There are at least 400 caucuses, and those are just congressional caucuses. There are also Senate caucuses. So to say it's noisy is an understatement. And if you look at a lot of the caucuses that have existed for a long time, like maybe you've heard of the Congressional Black Caucus. I used to pay attention to them a lot. Kwesi Mfume used to run it. Maybe it was because I liked his name. They get a lot done. But the other 399, what have they gotten done? You can look at their record. I'm not sure. Guess what? Dylan and A4LI are going to need all of us to help them if that caucus is going to be useful, and that's not the only way to move policy. Already talked about CIRM enough. So public policy and science, this is something, I don't need to tell this group how intricately linked public policy and science are. Even in a room of people like this, that you're so creative and you're thinking about new ways to fund science. We talked about Web 3.0. Excellent. And again, citing Brian Kennedy, if the earlier stage of the pipeline is still in great need of being funded, which it is, and by the way, it is in stem cell research and regenerative medicine too, you have to continually fund the beginning of the pipeline if you want to end up with enough shots on goal at the end of it. But if that's true, a lot of the funding for it is going to come from public sources, and that's policy. And private industry funding, you know, it doesn't come in early. We're looking at other mechanisms here. Amazing. The NIH still funds more medical research in the world than any other body. So you, those of you in this room, can take it upon yourselves, again, should you so choose. Don't know if you all stood. Don't know if you all want to communicate about science, but you can also pay very close attention to public policy around science. It's a little bit of a nightmare in the United States right now, I would say, with the conversations that go on. But even with those conversations that are at the forefront, there are lots of conversations happening behind the scenes. People like me and some of you going and meeting with senators and congressional members, or in your state house, meeting with your state. We have assembly members and senators in California. That's how public policy really gets done. So here is just a word collage, a word cloud of some of the global organizations that this field needs to be in front of. And you may think, oh, you see A-Star up there, we've already been very successful there. They're funding Brian and Andrea. Yes, and the conversation continues. There's more that they can do, and there's more that you can do to make sure that that happens. So why is it important for you, as the privileged members of society that you are, and I don't mean financially, I have no idea, but you are privileged in that you either are very well versed in science because you have scientific or medical training, or you have such a keen interest in it that just by being here and reading about it and wanting to learn about it, like Kenneth Scott, you know more than most of the people on earth ever will about biomedical research, science in general, how biomedical research gets done, what it leads to, and why that's important. That's the way to drive public sentiment, is people like you talking to other people, and I know someone in the audience was saying that during Lawrence's talk. We're talking about these things here, but not everybody knows them. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. So please go tell them. Please go tell them. So, and this is another slide I'm definitely not going to read, although I will highlight that one of the talks that we heard on Friday, what drives public investment, which is what Michael believes is, like I do, is going to be a big part of this field's evolution. That's public interest. And so there's a lot of public interest right now in longevity and in health span, and that's great, and it can also be dangerous, and the public is also going to need to be protected from the snake oil salespeople out there. The stem cell clinics that tell people that they can cure Parkinson's when I know there's not a cure for Parkinson's. You know, I could go on and on about that one. That will happen in this field as well. And if it's skin cream and all they're telling you is it's gonna make you look younger, that's probably okay as long as it doesn't cause damage to your skin. But telling people that they're gonna help you live forever when you and I know that nothing like that exists yet and we don't know the right combinations to use and whether they're dangerous, you know, there's a lot of work to do in this area, and you can be part of it. And another, I know I put a lot of quotes in here, but this one's really important, I think, for this field, because right now, this is who we are. We are a small group of citizens. If you think about this being a global field, movement, and something that we want to democratize and have available to everybody, Margaret Mead, I think, said it right. We followed this. It was like a North Star for us when we were trying to get Prop 71 passed in 2004, and people thought we were crazy, and that it would never happen, and that people were going to come and protest at our events and then at our board meetings, and luckily that didn't happen. But we're gonna have to work together. We already are in a lot of ways. You're here. You are part of this conversation, and I just encourage you to communicate with others, to be an advocate for the science, and to, if you have any interest or inclination at all, to be part of moving public policy, whatever that means for you wherever you live. And I'm always happy to talk with people about that. I worked with a lot of other states after we got Prop 71 passed in California, and there were copycats, and they ended up with, couldn't get stem cells passed in Texas, but they did get $3 billion for cancer research, and that's what built MD Anderson. And you know, worked with Michigan just to make sure that stem cell researchers weren't in danger of criminal charges and fines. So always happy to talk with people about these issues and collaborate and work through what might be the best strategy for you where you are and what you're trying to do. And that is all I have. Please get in touch. Please join the Health Span Action Coalition, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Melissa. What an inspiration that woman is. Honestly, you know, I feel so privileged to be able to work so closely with her. Questions?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for coming down, and kudos to Aubrey and Martin for inviting you. I think this kind of cross-pollination is so important. You know, I was talking to big pharmas last week at Bio, the people going between these and off to the legislature. It's the only way these messages improve. And to your point about spreading the message, I hope everybody in the room has posted a picture about this event to social media. Like that's how the rest of the world knows these things are happening and learns from it.
Agree. Dude.
Who's got the microphone? Indeed.
Thank you, Melissa. Your presentation was very understandably US-centric, but this is a European event. I'm curious what Health Span Action has done, if anything, lobbying governments and organizations outside of the US, specifically the EU, for example.
I'm lagged up. I don't need to be there. Sorry about that. So, excellent question, thank you. And to an extent, I agree the presentation was US-centric, it's where I've been. But if you think of the word cloud that I had, it definitely had agencies in other places. What have we done to lobby organizations in other areas now? To date, Nothing, because we haven't lobbied anywhere for anything yet. I was in Washington as part of the brain mapping organization because I'm on the board of that organization. It's certainly related to Health Span Action Coalition, but I'm so happy you asked that question because we are just about, as I was talking about with the illustrious David Wood earlier, we are just about to survey our membership, which after 18 months is at about 175 organizations now, about policy needs, wishes, desires, interests, and we're going to whittle that into, and the membership is global, and we will whittle that into an advisory board that we have on law, ethics, and society into a policy roadmap, and then we will start that program. We have not started that specifically, but we're absolutely looking at Europe, and I want to hear from Jose, but the one thing I can tell you is we absolutely are focused on Europe. We're also focused on Africa. We have African organizations, longevity organizations, and others. We're focused on Asia. We're focused on Latin America. Not going to leave Australia out. I have a lot of friends there in stem cell research. Bernie, my co-founder, spoke at the Vatican and at the WHO in years past as an advocate for stem cell research. So we will do this, and please join the coalition and contact me. Let's talk about it.
Jose.
Excellent presentation, Melissa. And my question is also in a way related to his point, because I'm based in Spain, and we have different laws, different regulations, different systems, and I am trying to understand also what is happening in the USA and to see what is more applicable. You mentioned A4LI. Also, there is the Global Health Span Policy Institute. Then there is Health Span Action Coalition. I really haven't gone deep into the differences and which one is more applicable. And then Britain is also very different, and it's not part of the European Union anymore, but they have they had the all-party parliamentary group, which was also a very important idea at the time. So anyway, I'm saying that because I want to try to organize in Spain the best thing that we can, learning from different experiences in different countries and different types of groups like yours.
Thank you for that. And we're also both members of, as is the LEV Foundation, the ILA. So there's already a focus that is global. And in terms of the best organization, I'm not sure about that. I think it's early, but I would never say, oh, join the Health Span Action Coalition and not something that's forming, whether it's European-wide or in Spain or in the UK or it's somewhere else. I would never say not. Right now, especially, we need all hands on deck, all hands in, right? We all need to work together. And I understand that may mean later on, you know, it becomes too separate. Like in the US, we have too many nonprofit organizations trying to do the same thing, and if they pulled together, it would be better, right? Yes, but right now, I think it's an and, yes and. Be part of the Health Span Action Coalition and start one in your country and join the ILA. And if Jose needs help in Spain, help him in some way. Go there. Aubrey's gonna be there October 1st, right?
Yep.
Go there and help with the effort there, especially if they're getting some traction. We can all help each other, and voices from other countries actually can resonate in your own country, for sure, for a field like this. Does that help? Okay.
I want to try and answer the question as well about what about Europe. I want to point to the work of Professor Andrew Scott, who was here last year, not able to come here this year, but he has a marvelous book written for the general public and also for politicians called The Longevity Imperative. He says we've had one longevity revolution, people are living a bit longer, but not particularly well, our health span hasn't increased. And the second longevity revolution is he's advocating to policymakers and general public as a whole, here's how society needs to change so that we can have a much richer, more valuable health span. So if you haven't come across Andrew Scott's recent book, I'd recommend it. And I'd also recommend people check out what Andrew Steele is about to do next. Andrew Steele is hoping to launch a policy initiative. He's based in Berlin, but obviously in Europe. He is also trying to bring together the best ideas on how to persuade policymakers of what needs to change so that we can have a society in which all aging is regarded as premature aging, in which we can all have a much longer health span. So that's not a question, I'm so sorry. But that is my answer. Look, check out the work of both Andrew Scott and Andrew Steele.
Yes, thank you, David. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Melissa.
Thank you, Aubrey.